But the thing is, like, I would have never gone in there and felt comfortable. And like that to me is like the worst thing we can do for our customers, right? Is to not make them want to feel welcome. And that to me is the number one thing that I think every comic shop, that should be the first thing they think of every day that they walk in the store is, am I walking into this place and people want to come in and shop here? And the second thing is to make sure that you have the right product mix. And it's not based on what you like. It can be, some of it is, because then it's easier to sell, right? But it should be, find out about your demographic, find out what kind of foot traffic you get and what schools are around you and, what other things are happening that are related, like art places and, different places that have shows and things like that you can actually work through. And I think everyone's in the right direction.
Hi, my name is Adam Freeman. This is Comic Industry Insiders, a weekly podcast where we talk to the movers and shakers of comics, the people who make our industry run. Our goal with this show is to really get to know them as people and to also get to know the things that make them tick, the secret sauce that makes what their business or their lives so influential, so that you can take those tools to your business or career in comics. This week's guest might be the most powerful person in comics. In 1999, Christina Merkler co-founded a small internet-based company with her husband, Cameron, out of their home. 25 years later, Discount Comic Book Service and Lunar Distribution are an ever-reaching empire that show no signs of stopping. Yeah, I'm leaving that in. I said signs of stopping. My respect and admiration of Christina as a leader, business person, and parent have only grown as I've gotten to know her, and I'm so excited to learn even more about my friend. Christina Merkler. Hi.
Hello.
So I'm assuming this is the office. This is the hub. This is where the magic happens. No.
This is the home office.
Oh, I got you. Because it looks like, what are we doing? We're going to San Diego late this month. Yeah, me too. Yeah. Who's in the office on the 30th?
Birthday. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's all I have on that. I'm hardly ever in this office. I work from home on Fridays, but I take care of my granddaughter on Fridays as well. So I'm usually actually at the dining room table working while she's watching Bluey, and I'm feeding her. She's like a little human garbage disposal, and that's all I do is feed her all day. And
how old is she?
Take her outside for fresh air. She's 3.5.
Oh, yeah. Amazing! Yeah. That's so much fun.
Oh yeah, wow. She's a lot of fun. She's gonna rule the world someday.
I have no doubt. Well, she's got you training her, right? Yeah, I believe that. So I wanted to get into a bunch of things with you tonight, and I appreciate you taking the time. I know that your schedule is packed, but there's actually, as I was telling you earlier, I'm on a family trip right now, and we are in Ohio, and my plan is to drive from here back down to Texas, and we're going to be stopping in Kentucky for a full day. Because if I don't get to a distillery that we drove past, I forget it. So I got to pick one. So I know that you did something you've done a couple times. You're a fan of bourbon.
I just came back from a trip.
Did you? Okay, good.
Yeah, so we do a Memorial Day weekend trip where we do the Bourbon Trail for the last 3 years at least. And yeah.
How do I get an invite to this trip? Because I'm in. I am in.
Oh, I'll just let you know. I'll just let you know when we're going next year. Done. Yeah. We usually head down because we're only 4 hours away. So we head down on Thursday evening and we head home Monday afternoon. And it's a lot of fun. And my sister is like the trip planner of the world.
It's good to have
I went to Italy with her for a couple of weeks, and she's just like, she's the end all be all. And so I will tell you what my favorite distillery is, though.
Please, that's what I'm looking for.
I can
only stop for one. I want to know what it is. Yeah.
I have a golden retriever who's in here whining and who's going to need to go outside and her sister is not listening. But sorry. So if you hear whining,
Okay.
that's high maintenance who goes to work with me every single day. So she's like, what's going on? So Willet Distillery is my absolute favorite.
Will it? Okay.
Yes. So,
All right.
and the reason I like them so much is when we took, I've done a tour at probably every single distillery.
Yeah.
So when we did Willet, we went to Willet last year for the first time, and it's like an estate type thing, much like Maker's Mark. And it was a Southern woman who had babysat the children or the grandchildren of the people who own it now. And she's, just doing tours. And she talked about how they had put all of their own money into it. They had built it, and it took them 28 years to get it to where it was. And and it's very family oriented. A lot of the, kids and everybody work for it. And I was like, oh my gosh, this sounds like my business. It's just so
Right.
crazy, right? So and it's beautiful. It is absolutely gorgeous. And it's even hard to get into the bar at Willet because it's a very small space. So when we went this last time, we finally got a reservation to the bar at Willet. Beautiful, like small plates, great cocktails, gorgeous atmosphere. It's just really nice. And then the next day, we actually went and did we did the outdoor space because they have a downstairs bar after a tour. The other thing I love about their tour is they give you tastings throughout the tour, where most distilleries do the tastings at the very end.
Yeah.
So
They have
it's a lot of fun.
the gift shop at the on your way out of the museum, right?
Oh
That's
yeah,
what they do.
there's
Yeah.
definitely a gift shop, and they have Noah's Mill, Rowan's Creek. Those are my favorites, and the Johnny Drum is
Oh.
actually really good too, and it's very reasonable.
Yeah,
So
Noah's Mill is gorgeous. I love
I
that.
love it.
I love
Yeah.
that. All right. Well, that is wonderful. I didn't realize that was going to be the answer to that question because I always like to throw in that like first one just to kind of get people warmed up. But I didn't realize you were going to set up the very next section of this, which is I wanted to talk a little bit about the early days of DCBS that became in stock trades, that became everything else that it has become Lunar Distribution. But the thing is that when we do this research, we do our best to try and like see whatever you've done before, any interviews you've done before. And I feel like we've told this story enough times, right? That you have your
Yeah.
pattern down. And I don't want to disrupt it, but I also don't want to like completely lose time to what you've already done before. So let me speed round my
Okay.
way through your story and you correct. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So you meet Cameron. You guys are working at a Hudson's department store. You work at Estee Lauder. Cameron is a huge comic book fan. You guys fall in love. You get married. He is an accountant, accounting at a couple of big firms, Ernst & Young. He goes to Lincoln Financial. He introduces you to comics. You love Miss Tree. You love Sandman, obviously. And I know you to be a true crime fan. You get into that. You met, did I say you met in college? Yeah, there we go. You get married, you get a house, he says to you, I want to do this thing with comics. But the thing is that Cameron is an anal retentive comic book fan, so he hates the fact that his comic shop is run by a retired postman chain smoking guy who's there all day long, and he wants
Well,
to
he wasn't the chain smoker. That was the
Oh,
second shop.
dang it.
Yeah.
I was completing the two stories.
But his shop like burned down. Like and it was kind of sketchy.
The postman
like,
or the chain smoker?
The postman. No, okay. The chain smoker is somebody else, and I shouldn't say it, but they are a great shop still in town. Okay. And she has since passed, and her kids have taken over. Okay. And it's a great shop, but okay.
Yeah. All right. So you launch your first website. You're running things out of your finished basement. And obviously, I love this detail. You're using the Wall Street Journal that was a day old Wall Street Journals from the for the accounting firm. Yeah. You've even had one customer throughout first 4 years in your basement, funneling everything back into the business. I think at some point you said you had 13 hours a day you were working with 3 children, which is crazy to me. And even in flash forward, you even end up buying mail order comics, one of your biggest competitors. So all of this to say, I've seen this story, right? I've seen this story happen, right? We've seen that. You and I have both seen this story happen a number of times, where a fan decides that they know enough about comics and they know what they like, and they think that what they like is what everybody else was going to like, and they launch it, and maybe they have some success or maybe they don't. A very common one is that they go through this and they have these same standards, right, that they had as fans, and they try to put that into their business, and they end up pissing off their vendors. They end up breaking those relationships that they need because they're trying so hard to act like collectors instead of as business people. So I guess really the question here, now that I've told you your own story, is what made you different than those people that you and I have now met probably dozens, if not hundreds of times? What made Cameron and Christina different from them?
I mean, at the time, there weren't a whole lot of online shops. So
True.
we were, one of really kind of a dozen, which is not even close now, right? There are
Yeah.
probably 1,000 out there. Um, I think a big part of it was the customer service aspect that we went overboard, knowing that we couldn't be face to face with them. We were, and I know that when we first started, we came from a department store mentality where the customer was always right. Like you did anything to make them happy, and you were always managing their expectations the best way that you could. And when you're dealing with any online business, you have to do that times 10,
Right.
right? So every email was perfectly crafted for them to understand that you were there, and so it wasn't, and eventually it got to the point where we're like, okay, we don't have to send them 3 pages of explanation, and those types of things. We probably overdid it a little. And we did have some people who really took advantage. Of our generosity, so to speak, right? But I think it was that, and it was just tenacity. Like he was determined for it to work, and once I got involved in it, I had just as much like need for it to be successful because I knew how important it was to him.
Right.
And then like anything that I do, I want to do well. So as soon as that happens, then it's, I'm all in. Which is exactly what happened with Lunar. Like we didn't expect it to happen. And then, but like once we were in it, it was like, oh no, okay, that's it. We've
I'm a
got to do
win.
what we got to do. Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly it. I want to be a winner.
I want to be a winner. Yeah, I can see that. I definitely can see that, both from both of you, having gotten to know you over the years. And well, I do want to talk. I do want to kind of scratch at this a little bit more, though, because I hear what you're saying about service, and I absolutely see that, and I see that. I've heard that from your customers. I've heard it enough times to absolutely believe that when it says DCB service, it's because service was the most important piece of the discount comic book. It actually spelled that out. I totally understand that. But I do want to scratch a little bit at this because in those interviews that I mentioned earlier, you talk about how Cameron was like, putting his regular collection into like My Lights, right? He
Yeah.
was,
Mylar. Yeah.
My
My
Light.
like twos
Oh
with
my goodness.
fullbacks.
Oh,
Oh
forget
yeah.
it. Never mind. I'm so sorry. Cameron,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you're out there listening, I can't
Yeah.
believe I said My Lights.
Right.
So that sort of compulsion, I won't say obsessive compulsive disorder. I won't say those words. But that sort of compulsion that can carry over into a business practice that becomes like, here's what I'm thinking. You and I have both now dealt with retailers who want to start working as publishers. They want to work with exclusive covers. I know that I've done a ton of this work. I know that
Yeah.
now that you're at Lunar and you're working with DC and Image, that they have a ton of these retailers. And we're flashing way forward here now with your
Sure.
relationships. But thinking back to that couple in the basement, uh, we know that there are some people that want to essentially act as publishers and buy these exclusives, but are not willing to do the work of publishing, which is you deal with the product that comes from the printer most of the time. Like, it comes from the printer and it's not flawless. The reason that 10s are so expensive is because they're so rare. The reason
Right.
that 9.8s are so expensive is because they are so rare. They cannot all
Mhm.
be 9.8s. So if you work in publishing long enough, you learn this. But these are retailers. They have not yet worked in publishing. So I guess my question is, were you those retailers? Were you like calling up Diamond every week, calling up the publishers? These are not 10s. I need 10s that go into my Mylars. Were you, and if not, how did you not fall into that trap? Because it seems like it would be one that would be sitting right there for you.
Well, you do, and we were. I mean, we weren't that severe. Cameron would definitely pick out the best copies for himself before, like he would go through the whole shipment and go,
Sure.
and now we have a lot more copies for people to go through when they pick Cameron's books. But to be fair, I'm going to be
Is this
honest with you,
whole
Tony.
is this whole thing been just a ruse to make sure
Yeah,
that
yeah.
Cameron gets the finest
Just so he
copies for
gets the
his
best
collection?
copies. That's the only reason. We really don't have
I
all those
see. I
testaments. Yeah.
understand now. Interview over. We cracked it. We
Yeah.
know the secret.
Well, it's funny because there are times where we're like, this is the best you're getting, Cameron. Like some of them are not. Yeah.
Oh,
And
wow.
he understands.
Yeah.
But I can say that 25 years ago, they were coming from the printers in better condition than they are now. Now that
That's
I see,
interesting.
and I think it's generally speaking, I think that and I don't know enough about the previous, right? But I know when Cadmus was in business and
Yeah.
Quebecor and everybody, I just think there were more printers and they had more time possibly to get it done, and they didn't have the near, a lot of people have changed their cover stock, as
True.
everyone knows. And so I do think it is different, but I can say that as an online business, it is more difficult because you have to make the decision for the customer about whether it's acceptable to send.
Right.
Where a customer who walks into your store can look and say, "Oh, I don't really care. It doesn't matter about the condition." And it also depends on the retailer themselves. If you really are catering to a very collector base, you're
Yeah.
going to be more careful about what you want to put out on the shelf. But we definitely made compromises on a regular basis because we had to based on what we were getting.
Right. I have no doubt.
Yeah.
I have no doubt. I mean, that's just the nature of
Yeah.
retail. It's the nature of publishing. It's the nature of printing,
Yes,
right?
it
It's just the
absolutely
nature of
is.
this industry that we're in. All right. That's actually that does get me uh quite a bit further than I understood. So you're in that finished basement until you finally move to a leased warehouse, right?
Mhm.
And then you begin purchasing warehouses. And I've seen it's actually been since I haven't been back since COVID, but
Yeah.
I know that you've grown probably I don't know how many
Yeah,
levels.
we actually sold that building that you were in.
Of course.
Yeah, well, I mean, we had to because it was too small, and a very nice coffee roasters in there now. But yeah, I mean, the first warehouse, I think it was like 10,000. It could have been 10,000 square feet, and we thought, oh,
Sure.
we're never going to fill this up. And about 3 years later, we were like, holy cow, we got to find another place. And then we doubled it. I think we were finally, well, it might have been 7 or 8 because I think we went to finally 15, and and we just were bursting at the seams, within a
Yeah.
few years from that too. But we had started in stock trades in 2005, 2004, 2005. And that DCBS has always been based on, you order what the customer orders, a little for late orders, and you really don't want inventory. And with in stock trades, it was the exact opposite. Like I have to have 3 of every title of every DC, Marvel, Image, Dark Horse, Boom, all of those. And so it kind of exploded the footprint that we needed in any warehouse we went into.
Right. Right. I remember seeing it in 2012, and when we on a previous episode, I was talking to Chip Mosier, and I don't remember if we talked about this, but he's the one who suggested that I come to Fort Wayne and come to the tiny little convention so that I could meet
Yeah.
you two. Basically, come to this
Hmm.
show so I could meet you two. And I ended up like it was an amazing small convention. I mean, Jeff Darrow was there, and
Oh yeah.
it was an incredible show.
Yeah.
But I remember seeing the way that you were picking and packing books and thinking about how big you were. And I'm like, they're basically doing it the way every comic shop I've ever been in is doing it. Like exactly the same. They have the slots for it was crazy to
Hmm.
me. But
Yeah.
because I imagined something completely differently.
The thing
Yeah.
that Chip loved the most is we had a Speedy Packer, and he's the one who named it the robot, I think, even because it
Yeah.
looked like a robot, right?
Yeah.
And it had two chemicals that went together, and it created this foam that went around the packages, and it
Oh
was
yeah.
like really amazing, and it sped up our packaging like immensely, and it really conformed to the package, so we had very low damages. And he was like determined. He was trying to talk Ross into buying him one. I'm like, and Ross is like, you send out like 10 packages a day. It's not like, like, come on.
Oh, I know. I came back from them talking about that you tell you that this thing called a crumpler. It's just what it did. It took
Oh,
like a big roll of craft paper and would just
and
crumple it
it
until you
does. It
could like cut
crumples
it
it in
off.
the, yep.
And I wanted a crumpler. It was awesome. But the name is awesome. A crumpler.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway. Um, well, so it's really just to go back to again once again to skip ahead to when distribution started to fracture. I remember people asking me like, what do you think about these new distributors? There's a fly in here. um uh, uh Vacation rentals, weird.
Yeah.
So I remember some people asking me, and one of the things I said was, well, I think DCBS, I think they're going to be really good at this because I think that they, we were already talking to you about another project about handling some distribution for us because you're good at handling single issue comics, right?
Right.
And I said, and I've been to their warehouse, they could grow 5x and not even have to move. And the fact that you had to move out of there almost immediately is hysterical to me. But well, let's talk about it, but let's go back then to that story, right? And so you leave the basement and you go into the warehouse. Are we talking during this period? Are we talking about like explosive growth? Are we talking about like exponential growth? How is this? How is this working for you?
Well, I mean, it's been a long time, but from what I recall, initially the first probably couple of years we actually are having regular employee. Even in the house we had employees, but it was like my sister,
Mm-hmm.
and then my neighbor came over and would literally sit on my living room couch and open up Bowen statues and check each one of them individually. He was retired older gentleman. And then my other neighbor on the other side had a daughter who was in high school, and she came over and picked and packed orders. And then, somebody that Cameron worked with, her husband, wanted to do email for a while. For it was just, it was like, home, it was completely homegrown. And all the kids were too young to work yet.
Right.
Because, eventually we put all of them to work too. But once we got into the warehouse, we actually started like employing real employees, right?
Right. Hiring
um,
people that you hadn't known before. Right.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And that was a definite learning curve, because you had to deal with like time clocks and other than somebody just writing down that they worked for 4 hours that day type of thing.
Right.
But we did have pretty big. It was probably 20% every year growth, and it was just like this word of mouth and customers, and then we had a lot of podcasts that liked us, and they were going on and giving us all this free advertising. Then we started advertising with them. But we
You were
never,
very early on
oh, yeah.
in sponsoring podcasts. I know of a great podcast that doesn't have any sponsors yet. I'm just putting that out there. All right,
Okay.
but no, yeah, you were very progressive. I remember. I think that might have been the first time I heard of you was when I heard about when I was listening to like a comics podcast, an early one.
Yeah.
I've always loved podcasts. So
Well,
yeah,
and then, and we would listen to them too. So it was like, and we were like, oh man, they really keep, touting us. And we feel like I remember one of the Wizard Chicago shows, we met
oh
up
yeah,
with the guys and we bought them dinner, and we were like, this is the least we could do for all the customers you're bringing us. And then, it kind of went from there.
that's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's really great. Because I just keep wondering like, is there a point where you're like, we got to throw bodies at this problem? Because generally that's where people tend to make mistakes. right? It's
I
it's
mean,
when it
all the
becomes
time.
explosive, right, that it
Yeah,
becomes a
no,
real issue.
you're all the time going, how, I mean, there it was like a feast or famine situation sometimes, right? Where
Mhm.
sometimes you'd have too many employees and you're just trying to find stuff for them to do.
Yeah,
And then you'd have another, you know, burst of growth, and then you're like, oh, we need 10 more people. You know, you felt like
yeah.
it. There was never 10 more people. It was like two more people. Um, and then it did reach a point when we were in our second location where we had to change the entire pick, because we were literally picking off of stacks, like
Right.
stacks, and just, you know. And Cameron, I'll never forget, Cameron had told one of the managers, he said, well, one of these days we're going to scan everything. So as we're going to scan a pick list, and then because we were just hand picking, right? And then
Yeah.
they'd go to the spot, and then we'd have other people who would recheck it, bundle it, and, you know, get it ready for the month end thing. And he's like, one day, and that manager's like, oh, I'll never work for you if that happens, and, you know, whatever. Which he left, you know, he eventually left for other pastures or whatever. But we did, and then we started doing everything on a scanner. And we had a developer through this whole time, but he was through a company. And then we hired Jason on 11 years ago. I think it's been 11 and a half years ago, as our own developer. And it was the greatest day of our lives. And he totally got it. Because we had gone through other, you know, programming people, and they just don't, comics is hard.
It
It
really
is. There's
is.
a lot of moving parts. There's FOC and initial order dates, and did it release, and how this date has to be pushed. And there's just so much, you know, you're ordering stuff that hasn't even been made yet. And it was a lot. It was a lot for anybody to kind of understand. And he just got it. And he's the most amazing person, and is like a workhorse like no other. And he got us through some really tough times.
I have no
Yeah.
doubt. Programmers, developers, they are worth what they get paid, and what they get paid
Oh
is
yeah.
more than you think when you get
Oh yeah.
started with
No, I
them.
mean,
Yeah,
until just recently, and he makes essentially but like, he always made more than we did. Like, we
yeah,
always paid him more because he was worth more to us.
right.
Yeah,
One of the two of you could go away. This
that's
guy,
right.
yeah,
Not
I
him.
got it.
No.
Well, you mentioned as you're talking about this, you mentioned your kids, and I think it's a really great segue to something that I've really always enjoyed about you as somebody who is a parent and has raised a child in a comic book store. Right, I did that
Hmm.
for a while,
Yeah.
and I've always been either self-employed or try to remain pretty active. I'm now, like, I get to work from home and I get to be with my kids. So as someone like that,
Yeah.
I've always loved that for you, this whole exercise is as much about being a parent and being a family member and being a neighbor and a sister and all of that, as it
Hmm.
is about being, kind of a straight ahead, no nonsense business person, right? For
Yeah.
you, like, this has always been kind of coupled. It's been my experience. I don't want to make that judgment for you, but you talked about how it all started in the house with your sister and your neighbors and your kids eventually, and now your kids are legitimately active in helping you with it. Will you do me the favor of running down I never can remember the full number of how many kids you were raising while building this empire?
Well,
Will
we
you
have
tell me their?
four.
Give me the quick rundown of who they are and where
Okay.
they were when the during the, like, put them in perspective of the
Okay.
empire building.
So Mackenzie is our oldest, and we started in 99. So she was 7. And then Caden is our second, and he was in 94. So he was 5. And Quinn was born in 98, and he was a year old, with me in that basement trying to, like, he was like 18 months by the time I started helping. And it was hilarious. I was just telling an employee the other day the story about Quinn. Quinn would, the Batman or Superman costumes that are like,
Yeah.
though they're not made to, last more than the night that you wear them, right? Like
Right.
they're just, basic polyester and call it cost all of, $15 or something. And Quinn would wear those every single day when he could come home from preschool. To the point he did until he was like 5. They were like knee high on him, and it was absolutely ridiculous. I had to re-sew them. I don't know how many times. So we got a Superman and a Batman one, and I had to just keep washing them because he just wanted to wear them all day long.
Yeah.
And then when they got so short, then we went to underoos. And then he had Batman underoos, and he would wear soccer socks all the way up his legs. He's so, it can be so embarrassed that I'm telling the story. And and he would call himself Super Quinny, and so we called him Super Quinny all the
Super
time.
quitting.
But he was like obsessed, But he was with me, and and my black lab that I had, and he was with me all day. And I would, get the kids on the school bus. I'd go down to the basement. I would do all of the emails. I'd package orders. I'd do whatever. I'd make sure I got them off the bus. I'd bring them home, and then they'd have to figure their stuff out. And then I'd do more work, and then I'd make dinner. And, it's just how it was. So I had 3 from the get go. And then Karis was actually, because, the business makes your life not your life anymore for a very long time. Quinn and Karis are almost 7 years apart. So there's 13 years between the oldest and the youngest. And Karis just turned 19 last month, or this month. We're still in June. And, so she grew up her entire life. She was 2 weeks old when she came to work with me, and she came to work every single day. And I had her in a pack and play. And then eventually, when she was a toddler, we got the toys out, and she's just always been a part of the business. Yeah.
How do you think growing up, essentially growing up alongside of your business, right? Because for 2 of your
Mhm.
kids, like they just were, 3 of your kids, they're just getting started. One of them was just born, basically. How do you think, and then your others coming in after, how do you think growing up with your business has affected them as people? How have you seen that, if any?
That although everyone gives millennials and Gen Zers a bad rap, generally speaking, for work ethic, it depends on, the type of work ethic that you see in your parents.
Yeah.
And they saw that we worked very hard and that they were still very important to us. But they also had to realize, that anything that we were giving them was based on the fact that we were working so hard to give them the things that they need. Our, I mean, I'm sure everyone says this, but I have the 4 most incredible children. Right. And I mean, I have to tell you, like, my cousin came to Christmas, and she hadn't seen the kids in years. And, and she sent me a text after, and she's like, I just want to tell you how incredible it was to just sit there. I'm going to get like teary eyed just talking about it. To watch you interact with your kids, because she had come a little early with her girlfriend, and they were just sitting hanging out. And my kids, all of them, and their significant others, they were all just like, okay, mom, what do you need done next? And this, and everyone was like, and it was just like a whole team effort to get everything done before the family came for dinner. And she just said, I've never seen anything like this. It was just the most incredible experience to watch you with your kids, and how important you clearly are to them, and they are to you. And it's true. Like, they are my everything. If someone told me I had to just like give up the business because of them, I would do it in a heartbeat. That's just,
I don't. I don't
there's
think
no question.
anybody's going to
Yeah.
suggest that. But
Yeah.
that's all right. But talking about the business, how do you think DCBS and the everything that's grown out of it? How do you think that has been affected by the fact that you're such a family, right? As a family unit,
Yeah.
you guys are building this business. I mean, I guess what I'm trying to scratch at is it you and Cameron are obviously remarkable humans. I knew this from the first time I met you. But my question really, I think, in the broader sense is the Merkler family really the secret sauce here, right? What is it about that has affected both ways?
I mean, I think it's that. I think it's that when you show people that they're important to you, then and you give them um they know, like even my son-in-law will tell you, like he's not necessarily as close with his family, but my entire family is like kind of embarrassingly close. And so I think that is a part of it. Like we used to get together for Sunday dinner every single Sunday with my family. That was both of my sisters, their kids, my mom and dad, and us, right? And it was like a standard. That was just how it was. And so I think that when you have that kind of closeness, and we're all loud, we're all obnoxious, we could get into knockdown, drag out fights. Like, but we also would do anything for each other, right? And
Right.
I think that when you put that into a business, it's very like you do the same thing for your customers, or you do the same thing for,
Right.
whatever. Like you just like you make it work. Also, when you have a lot of people in a family, you just got to make things work. And you got to realize that sometimes you're just not the center of attention all the time. And so I think that's helpful, right? Because I think,
Sure.
yeah, I think it's helpful for children to see that, and to also, like, my kids are amazing to other people in the service industry because of our business, because they've seen how, like, some of the ire that we got, even just from customers in general, or people who just aren't as nice, right? They can see how hard we would work to try to make it right, and then people wouldn't be happy. So then what actually comes out of that is them being more appreciative of, like, walking into a store and something doesn't go right, and they realize that the person behind the counter isn't the person that's making this not good for them. I mean,
Right.
sometimes it is, but generally speaking, they have like a much greater respect for the people who are on the front lines, who have to take, the feedback that's not always necessarily directed directly at them.
Yeah, I get that, and I'm sure that I think we're going to get a little bit into some of that feedback in a little bit. But before I hit mute and clear my throat,
Okay.
um, let's pretend for a moment that you're at a cocktail party, meeting
Okay.
someone brand new, maybe doesn't know
Mhm.
comics or slightly affiliated, and I'm sure you've had this experience. Explain in however many words you would take in that particular scenario, what is your business, right?
Have to
You and
do
I,
it
you
all
and
the
I both
time.
know it. You and I both know it
Yeah.
well. I just want to hear like the full pitch. What do you do for a living, Christina?
Well, I own an online comic shop. And then people will usually say immediately after I say that, "Oh, they still make those?" Uh, every time, every time. And I'll say, "Oh, yeah, it's a pretty big business. We have a lot of customers." And then they'll say, "Well, how does that work?" And I'll say, "Well, generally speaking, we have a website, and you pre-order books that haven't even been made yet." Um, but in a couple of months, you can decide whether you want to get it in a monthly or weekly or twice weekly type of situation, and you can buy any comics that are available in the industry. And generally people will be like, "Oh yeah, I love comics." And they don't know anything about comics. They just say it like, "Oh yeah, I love the Avengers movie," or "I love the Batman movie," or whatever. And um no one out it's so funny to me how outside the industry there are so many people who aren't aware of, like, comics being a thing. And it just, like, it's crazy to me because it's my whole life.
Yeah.
um right, so
Yeah,
like
and
you
all
just
of your
don't
friends
understand
are in
because,
comics, and we all
right,
know the
yeah, yeah,
details of like, not just the comics themselves, but the businesses
hmm,
around them and the
oh
people and their
yeah,
lives and the drama and the oh yeah, oh
yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
And so it is usually difficult to explain, and people will be like, "Oh," and I'll give them a card, because they'll say, "Oh, do you have a card?" And I'm like, "I do, but just really, I just want to write the website down for you, and here you go." And most of the time, if they really know nothing about comics, I do not even give them DCD service. I give them in stock trades because they can buy whole stories. And I think that that's the way to bring people in who've never read comics before. Because if they feel like they're getting a whole story, they're going to be more likely to come back and look for more whole stories.
Can you talk now a little bit about what? Well, no, wait, that's not all that you do though. All right. So let's say that maybe this person is into, you're meeting somebody from the Harvard Business School and you're telling
Okay.
them what your business is. It's not just an online website,
Right.
right?
So then I'll usually say we also happen to own, and I do say that we also happen to own a distribution company that distributes DC Comics, Image Comics, and then I'll usually say Image prints Walking Dead and Invincible because I know that they will know that based on TV, and they'll say, "Oh yeah, definitely." Like I just told my doctor that last week, and they said, "Oh yeah, no, I know Walking Dead and Invincible." And I said, "Yeah." So those were the original, and we distribute those to comic shops all over the world. Oh, that's interesting. That's really cool. That's all they really usually
All
say.
right.
Yeah.
There you go. That's enough. Uh, I want to stick with DCBS, but before we do that, I would like to talk just about. So we really it's the three main components, right? There's DCBS, there's in stock trades, and there's Lunar
Mhm.
distribution. Now, you're a few years into Lunar. What is do you mind talking about what's the breakdown, say revenue wise, of the size of those three components? Can you talk
So
about
I
that? What
mean,
the ratio is?
DCBS and InStock are like a speck compared to
Oh,
yeah.
okay,
I mean, because it's the whole market, right?
right.
Like DC, generally speaking, although there is Universal and Diamond UK, but we have a very very large part of the DC market, and so all of those stores combined are much that revenue is much bigger than what DCBS is. I mean, DCBS and InStock trades actually surpassed DCBS in revenue 2 years ago.
Oh,
Yeah, 21 was like we couldn't keep anything in stock and in stock trades, and it was absolutely bonkers. So it makes me a little sad because DCBS is our baby. But in stock trades, I think is a perfect representation of where I think the comic market is going, which is into collected editions. And I'm not saying that periodicals aren't here to stay. I just think that the way to grow the market is through collected editions. It's not necessarily through periodicals.
yeah. I definitely can see that. I mean, I think the model for periodicals is still very strong, but
Oh
you're
yeah,
absolutely right that like especially if you're trying to get someone in, a trade paperback just makes much more sense. A graphic novel makes much more sense. They understand that, right?
right.
It's a full thing. Well, so let's stick with just the main company for now, the original, the OG
Okay.
DCB service. Um, let's now that you've kind of entered distribution and you have an even better understanding of the industry overall, not that you didn't before, but I think there's no way you
Oh
can't
yeah.
understand it as a whole.
No.
And I'm really looking forward to getting into where we are as an industry because I think you're going to have not only unique, but perhaps the only real insight into what that looks like. Um, how do you think of that original company, DCBS? How do you think about it inside of the ecosystem of the comics industry? Right?
I think, I mean, to be honest with you, DCBS is definitely um, more skewed towards fanboys. So I mean, it's a good representation of independent comics as well. But I think that, we've built this thing based on I mean, we still sell a lot more, obviously, Marvel and DC and Image than we do of anything. And that's not to say that everyone doesn't do that because most people do. But, we still struggle with trying to get more independent things sold through DCBS. And we're always trying to figure out how to promote that because we have a great customer base and it's kind of leveled off somewhat in the last couple of years. Like there's always been like 20 people move, 20 people get added, so or 100 here or 50 there or whatever. But I have noticed since the pandemic specifically that and I don't know if it's because I'm just older and it's 25 years later, but I do see that we still have a lot more people that are just that core top three. And Mackenzie and Cameron and I were discussing this a lot in our January meeting about how are we going to get more new readers to actually come to DCB service. And I struggle with that because I think that that's as a consumer for like me, I wouldn't shop at DCB service. That's just that like I'm the reader. That's the difference, right? So I
Right.
think DCBS is definitely more collector mentality, where Insect Trades is definitely more reader. And believe me, there are tons of collectors that order from Insect Trades. But the key is that Insect Trades has the most potential to bring new readers that just would never buy a comic normally, because it's easy. Like you say, oh, it's just like Amazon, right? You
Right.
go in, you see it, it's there. You can buy it and you can get it in less than a week. So um, I think DCBS is always going to be, strong as long as periodicals are strong, because that is really the strong suit for DCBS. It is periodicals.
It's interesting. Some of the things you're saying are really interesting to me. Like, can you talk a bit about what does the average DCBS user, consumer, customer, what do they look like? I don't know how much you want to dig into that. I don't know if you know demographic data. I don't know if you know
I
but like even
don't.
size of their orders. I'm just kind of
Oh,
curious.
literally, I just got a check in the mail for $13.40.
You got a
Like
check in the
a
mail for
check in the mail for a
$13.40.
DCBS order that was $13.40. And then we have a few people who order literally full line of everything. And there are like two or three guys like that, right?
Yeah.
And they've been with us for like 20 years. So I mean it's nuts. But I mean, in average, I would say, and these are monthly orders is the difference
Right.
too, right? So I mean, it's probably Cameron would know better than me, like average orders. But I would say that it's probably around $150 is like the sweet spot
Okay.
for the majority of our customers. And then we have a lot of outliers on, either side of it. So, now
And
I'm talking
so
that's a
so
discount. So,
yeah, all
and
right. So
that's,
call that
36% or whatever.
$25 a week. Call that
Yeah.
$50 retail a
Yeah.
week. That feels like a pretty average,
Hmm.
consumer. It feels like right.
Right.
All right. Well, yeah.
Well, and so many of our customers are like an hour and a half from a comic shop,
Right.
or don't even have one within 3 hours. So we have so many consumers like that like if we were to close, like if we were to say, okay, DCBS is done, right? Like I don't know that those sales would ever come back. Like no one would get them because most of them are like people who just don't have the ability or just the time to be able to go and drive that far to a comic shop.
Well, I think it's one of the most interesting themes that has come out of my conversations with retailers is that it's just that, and I find it remarkable that it also affects you. But this idea that there's the consumers in comics, fans of comics, are not necessarily fans of Marvel and DC or Superman or Walking Dead. They're fans of the places that they buy them. The experience that they get in purchasing, and then there's the reading and the creators and that sort of thing. So what you see, I mean, we've seen this. I mean, now that you're on the distributor level, I imagine if you wanted to, you could definitely see what I'm talking about. But where as a publisher, I've seen where a retailer will go out of business, and something like half, if not 75% of those numbers just are gone.
Go away.
They
Yeah.
just go away, which
Hmm.
means that those were not comic book fans. Those were, Al's Comic Shop fans.
Hmm.
That's who they were. They identified as Al's Comic Shop fans. And so, they maybe we get them back if Al comes back and makes another comic shop. So I think it's interesting that even for you, that would carry through, and I don't doubt it at all. Um, it's you're talking about DCBS. One of the surprises me about this, about it as a website. I actually went in and re-registered as a consumer today, just kind of get a feeling for that. Um, uh, what surprises me about the whole sign up process and looking at the website again after a long time is how much it is remarkably simple and as remarkably has been unchanged.
Yeah.
Is that just a factor of it just being, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? Is that
Yes. I mean, we talked, it's funny, right before the pandemic, we were talking about doing a whole website redesign and Lunar just shot that one right in the foot.
I bet.
uh, but the pandemic also did it because like during the pandemic, we still needed to work. So like Jason did all these incredible things for us like during the pandemic. And like now we have an in-stock link. We never had an in-stock link before. And so we were able to sell our any inventory, which we had to because we didn't know how long we were going to be shut down. We didn't know how long it was going to be until we had new comics. And so like he was like, we were coming up with just crazy ideas of the things that we wanted to have upgrades done, right? And now it's like, if you saw the list that he had, I would quit my job if I saw that list. Like, I was like, what? And like Cameron, like
Every
it's
developer's list, though,
oh
everybody
yeah,
has
oh
that.
yeah.
That's why they say, okay, why don't we rank this?
Yeah, no, we have to
Yeah.
prioritize all the time. And so, and then like if a publisher asks us, like if DC or Image asks us for something, we're like, oh, okay, well, this goes on to the priority. And like whatever was the priority before, it's no longer.
Never gets done.
And poor Emily in customer service has like a 20 item list. And Cameron's like, we're going to get to her items. I swear, and he's been saying this for months. And then Jason was finally able to do a couple, but, because then we have priorities, for retailers, like they'll say, hey, this is the feedback. And sometimes they're very simple, like not even fixes, just simple upgrades that we can make. And it's great. And he can do it pretty quickly. But there are a lot of moving parts to these darn websites. It's just,
Oh,
it's
I'm
kind
sure.
of, it's daunting to do it. But the other thing is DCS and in-stock trades, they like at some point, you can make it look prettier, but like for functionality, we've kind of got it in the
Yeah.
bag, so to speak. So
Yeah, no
yeah.
doubt. Okay. What do you think most, many people have opinions about you. There's no shortage of that. What do you think would surprise most comics industry people about DCBS in particular?
um that we're probably the most honest business you've ever dealt with. I mean, genuinely, like we're so transparent about everything. And when we screw stuff up, we admit it. When we do something wrong, we admit it. And the other big thing that would probably surprise people is I am not sitting up on, a hill, like looking down on everyone, trying to figure out how to plot the destruction of the direct market like everyone thinks I am. I'm way too busy working and just trying to grow the business. And just not our business, but just like the industry as a whole, and just like the key for us has always been to get as many comics into as many people's hands as possible. That's it. And that should be the goal for every single comic shop owner, period. And we have worked really hard to try to do that. So
All right, so let's say for a moment, let's put you into an 80s wacky 80s body switch kind of movie,
okay.
right? And you're taken back present day to a wife who just decided to start staying home from work with her 2 kids. Her husband says, "Hey, I want to open a comic shop." He doesn't have the foresight to have a website. This guy, he has a spot that he wants to open. He wants to open his own comic shop. What would you do? You have a small nest egg, right? Medium-sized city. What are the things that you would do, knowing what you know now, that would keep you from worrying about someone like DCBS, right? What do you think what were the things that you would be doing, focusing on?
I think the biggest focus for any new comic shop would be to make it, you want to make it a place that any person wants to walk into. That is the first and foremost thing. It shouldn't even be about the product initially. It should be, does it have really great lighting? Is it easy to walk through when I put product in it? Are people going to feel comfortable walking in the door? Are people going to walk by and say, oh, that looks interesting, and I would like to walk in there and see what they have? And I think that there are tons and tons of shops that are very good at that, but there are probably, a lot that aren't as good at that. As a woman, I was terrified going into the comic shops with Cameron when we were dating. And I would have never gone in. And not that they weren't welcoming. Well, the first one was like kind of scary. And just because it was like really tiny. And like as soon as you walked in the door, he was like right there. And he was kind of crotchety and, and Cameron loved
Is this
him,
the
but
mailman?
like this is the postman. Yeah.
Okay.
The guy who worked at the postal service all day and then he like was just open at night. But the thing is, like, I would have never gone in there and
Yeah.
felt comfortable. And like that to me is like the worst thing we can do for our customers, right? Is to not make them want to feel welcome. And that to me is the number one thing that I think every comic shop, that should be the first thing they think of every day that they walk in the store
Right.
is, am I walking into this place and people want to come in and shop here? And the second thing is to make sure that you have the right product mix. And
Okay.
it's not based on what you like. It can be, some of it is, because then it's easier to sell, right? But it should be, find out about your demographic, find out what kind of foot traffic you get and what schools are around you and, what other things are happening that are related, like art places and, different places that have shows and things like that you can actually work through. And I think that I think everyone's in the right direction. Like I'm doing Eisner judging right now
Oh yeah.
for the Spirit of Comics retailing. Oh my gosh, these stores are amazing, right?
Oh, you're doing the
And
Spirit of Comics retail this year.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's a whole nother beast. Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's
Yeah.
amazing. And I'm inspired by all these shops. Like I want to just open every one of these types of kinds of shops in my own town because they're, and they're really killing it. And I think that we get more and more and more shops like that, then
Yeah.
I'm never going to have to tell a person when I say that I, sell comics for a living. I'm going to finally have somebody like, oh, cool, my shop is. And I never get that. I always get the, oh, they still make those, right?
Right.
So I'm waiting for the day where someone says, oh, yeah, I go to such and such. Actually, so Karis, my youngest, her
Yeah.
boyfriend is from Columbus. She met him at IU. And she was talking to him and she's like, oh, yeah, my parents own, like an online comics shop. And he was like, oh my God, really? Are you kidding? I love comics. And I was like, yeah, sure he does. And he's like, yeah, my dad takes me to the Laughing Ogre, or my uncle used to take me to Laughing Ogre all the time. It's just on the street from where we live. And I was like, hallelujah. She met a boy who likes comics.
And not
Because
just
all
likes
the
comics, but likes the Laughing Ogre.
right, yeah.
You've got a
Which I
staff
got to
member.
visit last weekend. I got to
Oh
visit
yeah.
them. It's a great shop. My gosh, it's it's
Yeah.
amazing. And I took my granddaughter in and bought some Bluey books, and yeah, it was amazing. Yeah.
That's wonderful. It's funny you talk about the needing to stock inventory. There's a story going around, or it was going around a lot, or a while ago, about a shop that was closing, and everybody I knew who read that story is like, man, this guy was focused so much on the stuff that he liked that he wasn't really focused on the stuff that the consumer likes. And you look at the pictures of the store, and it's like, I can see how you would want that kind of shop, but it's a tough way to run a business, right? Which is,
It is.
it's
Yeah.
really difficult. Well, yeah. All right. So I want to talk just a moment before we get into Lunar, and I think that there's a lot to unpack in Lunar. I do want to talk for just a moment about in-stock trades. And the reason is I think that there's a really interesting part of your story that involves in-stock trades, and that is your split from Fort Wayne, where you began this, to Memphis, and how there was essentially like my understanding is you began in Fort Wayne and you decided to open a warehouse in Memphis to split off. And then you decided to move everything to Memphis. And then you decided to split again back to Fort Wayne. And that's where we remain. Please let me know if I got that wrong. But so can you would you talk just a moment about that and let's talk about, like, at the end of the day, that's a lot of back and forth.
Yeah.
right? That's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I don't want to get too much into like the weeds of the mechanics of that period, but one of the things I really wanted to understand was when you look at the experience of the moving back and forth, not necessarily just the financials, because I think it's a
Right.
smart idea to put things in that area, but uh, the experience of that move, do you feel like that weakened or strengthened your company as a whole? And let's talk about the company as a whole and not,
Right. I mean, I think that it did what it needed to do when we did it. So I mean, Cameron and I had been discussing going to Memphis, Olive Branch, whatever,
right.
because we wanted to be closer to Diamond, and we wanted to
So
be able to get.
I just want to pause there to just to explain to the audience who may not know. Diamond Comics' distribution, right up until COVID, had a 30-year monopoly on the distribution of comics. They consolidated all huge percentage. I don't even talk about what the number is, but a huge percentage of their distribution they consolidated into a place called Olive Branch, Mississippi, into this
Mhm.
massive
Yes.
warehouse. Like you cannot see one side from the other, standing on the other
Nope.
side
You
in
cannot.
warehouse. Massive warehouse is an incredibly impressive operation.
It is.
In as far as the mechanics and the machinery and the systems that go into it and the thinking, the woman who put that together, Cindy Torney, did I get that right?
Fournier. Fournier.
Tournier. It's been a while since I've seen Cindy. It was remarkable that what she put together, and they essentially took like I have no idea, 7, 8, something like that, warehouses, and combined it all over the country, combined it into this one massive warehouse in the shipping hub of the nation of the continent, right? So
Yes.
so that's where you wanted to move. It's in Olive Branch, Mississippi, which is right across the river from Memphis, Tennessee.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally it was 15 minutes from our warehouse once we actually moved down there.
Right.
So, and we were in Memphis and they were in Olive Branch, and they're, right next to each other. Olive Branch held essentially everyone's backlist. So they still had Plattsburgh. Plattsburgh still had some backlists, but
Right.
if you were reordering, it was coming out of Memphis or Olive Branch. Well, because it was Memphis and they moved across that's beside the point.
We don't need to get
So
that.
with in stock trades, in stock trades is in stock trades. And
Right.
we were having issues where, a shipment would be shorted or we'd get damages and then we'd have to wait to get replacements and it would take, 3 or 4 or 5 days. And, our real like mission was always to get everything out in 48 hours. So we were like, what do you think? And the kids, Quinn was like a sophomore in high school at this point. Karis was in like fourth, fifth grade. I don't remember the exact. She might have been in third grade. And we decided, we're like, okay, Quinn is almost, out of high school. Karis will be fine if we move. Not really, but it'll be great. I'll be a Southern grandmother and this is going to be amazing. And we're going to buy our dream home down there. And, this is going to be awesome. But we had just bought the building in downtown Fort Wayne. And so we said, well, we can't get out of this. So for the next 3 years until Quinn has graduated high school, then we can, make the move. So for 3 years, I drove every month down to Memphis to see Cameron once a month, every like one weekend, and then he would drive back one weekend. So it was like every other weekend.
You
I put
drove.
85,000 miles on my car. Yep, in 3 years.
Okay.
And it was a lot. I mean, it was draining. And then I was taking care of DCBS up here, and then he was taking care of Instock Trades down there. And then the year that Quinn graduated high school is the year that Caden, our second, graduated college. And then we moved to Memphis. And then 2 months later, Mackenzie, our oldest, got married. Yeah, it was just like, it was the most, we sold our house that we'd been in 20 years. We moved our entire business and we had kids graduating high school and college and getting married. And it was a blur the entire that summer. And when we moved to Memphis, Cindy Fournier had told us, she said, I just want to let you know that it may be difficult getting staff. And we were like, well, we're only going to need to hire like 20 to 30 people. So we should be okay. And it wasn't. It was awful. It was the worst experience I've ever had in my life. And I mean, it was just like a revolving door of people. It's a warehouse city is the problem with Memphis. So there's a Williams Sonoma and a Disney and a Nike and everybody, and they just go from job to job to job, and no one ever really cares if they lose their job because they just go to another warehouse to get a job. And it was hot, and I'd rather live in London. That's more my my weather vibe. It's definitely not hot and humid. So I didn't like anything about it. And the city is not well run, and it's just it was awful. So I said I can't do it, and I moved back to Fort Wayne and brought DCBS back with me. And then once Lunar happened, then we finally brought In Stock Trades back. So In Stock Trades has been back for 2.5 years now, and now In Stock Trades and DCBS are in their own building, and Lunar's in its own building.
Okay. So
Yeah.
there is no longer is there no longer a warehouse in Memphis?
No.
Okay. All right.
It's
That was
been
right.
it's been a year and a half. Sorry, it's been a year and a half since we've
Gotcha.
been out of
Okay.
Memphis. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
That was what my clarity was we're looking for. All right. So go back to the question. Looking back on the experience, because essentially you ended up back where you started.
So
Net
I can
positive,
say,
net negative.
okay.
Yeah.
So the summer that we moved to In Stock Trades down there is the summer that Diamond had some sort of weird, like, do you remember when they did some sort of update and then there wasn't a backup, and there was 2 weeks in Olive Branch where nothing went out of Olive Branch?
That's right. I remember. Yes.
We
Yes.
moved to Memphis like 2 weeks before that happened. So let me tell you, no, but honestly, had we not moved to Memphis and we
Right.
didn't have In Stock Trades there, In Stock Trades probably would have gone out of business,
Oh,
because it took them, a few weeks to get back up and running. But once they did, we were getting product right away. And had we been waiting in Fort Wayne, I don't know that we would have survived it, because it did take them a while to get it back.
yeah.
And so I think everything happens for a reason in this, whether it's the universe or God or whatever you want to say, right? But I do think that all of our decisions were like made sense. And then when we realized that they didn't make sense anymore, we decided to make a new decision. And
Got
I think that it made us a stronger company for it. It did not necessarily make us a stronger couple because it was a lot of stress and agony that we went through. It did sometimes, it didn't sometimes. I think that bringing In Stock Trades back to Memphis, though, is the best decision that we ever made, and that is why In Stock it has surpassed DCBS at this point, because now we have the proper staffing, the right um, we have the right mix of people doing the jobs we need them to do.
It's interesting that you say that. I wonder, so you talk about all those other warehouses that are in that area because of the kind of shipping confluence that happens there. It'd be really interesting to see if you're at the beginning of a trend of maybe we're in the middle of the country, we're in the Midwest, right?
Mhm.
Why not ship from the middle?
Right.
I don't know. It would be interesting to see that. How much of that experience in Memphis? Actually, before I answer this question, I want to give you a story of my own. I've been working in publishing a long time now, and I've been to that Olive Branch warehouse a couple of times. The one particular time I was with a publisher that was really struggling with some damages and misships and things that we had worked really hard for and weren't going out.
Mm-hmm.
So we went down to look at it, and I wanted to tour the warehouse while they were shipping out a weekly, shipment of single issue comics, not just on a quiet day. I wanted to be on
Mm-hmm.
a busy day. And what we saw, it surprised me. It surprised me that what we were seeing was people with not a lot of training handling product that was, that need, people like Cameron get really
Yeah.
obsessive over. And I will say now that I've told that story, that Diamond, I know, has put a lot of other more equipment, sophistication, and systems in place since I was in that warehouse at that time. So I don't. What I'm saying is an
Sure.
issue that I believe they've addressed. Now, having said that, how much of your decision, we're going to go into lunar distribution now, and I want, as a segue into that, how much of your decision to kind of go into distribution whole hog, I know that you were kind of forced into it, and I want to talk about that for a minute, but when you had to make the decision of, all right, we're going to put the same effort into that we put into other things into this,
Mhm.
how much of that was knowing that their main enterprise, their main warehouse is in that area with that labor, and how difficult it was for you to get good labor? How much of that weighed for you on the scales?
I
Did it
mean,
come up? I mean, I'm just connecting things that weren't there.
honestly, the staffing was an issue because it was COVID, right? So
Right.
we
Yeah.
just had to pull from DCBS at that time. But,
Yeah.
luckily there was no new product coming in, so we didn't have a whole lot of work to do. Like DCBS never stopped, by the way. Like
Right.
everyone got to enjoy,
Oh yeah.
their Netflix and, running out of stuff to watch. And in the meantime, we were working 13-hour, 16-hour days sometimes. And I went 6 straight weeks without getting a day off.
So you didn't
Um,
make sourdough bread once during
I
that
did not
period?
make sourdough
Oh.
bread once. I had a very long list of Netflix documentaries I would have loved to have watched. Um, but no, it's funny. The staffing wasn't the issue. Like when it happened, the first focus we set, because like we assumed it was just like it was going to happen until Diamond came back. So it was going to be a few months, but we didn't know how long the pandemic was going to last, right? So we thought it could be 6 months, it could be a year, we don't know. So let's put our best foot forward. And so the first thing we did is sat down and said, we've been to every Diamond Summit they've ever had. And we were like, okay, what does everyone complain about? And like on a consistent basis, right? The first thing was, just damages in general. And they always complained about damages or inaccuracy. So we said, well, we're going to scan books just like we do at DCBS, and we're going to make sure that we package them better. So we went down to the warehouse. We figured out how to, we were like, you got to double box it, but you've got to put something between those double boxes. And we were like, let's try this out. And it was really, it was, just trial and error of figuring it out. Um, the second thing was that everyone complained that they didn't know what they were paying for each box as they received it. Like they didn't know what the cost of each individual box was. So we absolutely had to have that from the beginning. So those were the things that we were more like concerned about, as what we had always heard were the things that were the biggest issues in retailers' minds, because we didn't think it was going to, like, we weren't thinking growth or, like anything like that. We were just thinking logistics. How do we get it to them in the best way we can possibly get it to them and make it as easy for them to order it as possible? And that's really what we started with.
Right. I'd love to get into more into shipping, because I do find that to be a really interesting piece of the lore and the effect that you guys have had. But before we do that, you've been at this now 4 years, right?
Mhm.
Uh, you came at this as a retailer, and I'm sure you had as you said, you had some expectations, you had some beliefs, you had things that people always complained about.
Mhm.
Um, what and I know that I know that you have stayed very involved in the business. You've gotten to know people behind the scenes. But what has been the biggest surprise for you? Like, I know that when going for as a retailer, and who I thought was a pretty sophisticated retailer at the time, going into publishing, there were just a lot of like, oh, well, this makes so much more sense now. You know,
Yeah.
there was a lot of that for me, and I don't think I'm that dumb. Was there anything like that for you? Like, was there any, or did you just show up and go, yeah, I always knew I could handle this?
No, I think the public, it's very different on the publisher side. The actual like engagement between publisher and distributor.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I always knew that they were very connected. Um, every publisher is so different, though.
Yeah.
Like in the way they work things, and the way, and I guess my biggest surprise is the amount of like only knowledge of only what you're doing as opposed to like an industry overall type of thing, even with publishers, right? So like they only know their systems,
Yeah.
their whatever, they have their vernacular. It's a very like, even when I just talked to a publisher today and I said something about, I said, oh, you mean like a one shot? And they were like, oh yeah, like I guess that's what you call it in the, and I said, yeah, I get it. Cause like everyone has, I know, but like I've known that for a long time. A lot of people know it. There are a lot of people who don't know it, right? But
Yeah.
I'm like constantly surprised by like how publishers like have literally managed to do things for years and years and years, and it's completely different than every other publisher, right?
Yeah.
And I kind of see where the disconnect is now. Like they almost need an SOP for publishing, an SOP for distribution, an SOP for for like running a retail shop, because that's the thing, right? Like every single retail shop in the direct market is its own unique thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
It
And I think that's part of the
is,
strength, right? That's part of why
but it's
this particular
also
world has continues to revolve.
but
Yeah.
it's also the weakness,
You're not wrong.
because because a publisher can never make everyone happy. So
Never.
like it's like it is the greatest thing and also the worst thing,
That is
right?
correct.
um and I think that people had like, you want to be unique, you want to be that special shop, but you also have to realize that like that everyone else, like you have to look outside your own circle and say, oh, okay, I get it. I mean, the joke is you ask 10 retailers a question, you're going to get 10 different answers. That's no joke because that literally happens, right?
Only 10? You're likely to get
Yeah.
13. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that absolutely I believe that, and I will tell you, as someone who makes his living basically teaching publishers how to be publishers,
Hmm.
right? It's because it's just such an intricate little thing. Like
It
it's
is.
really difficult to understand all the complexities. As someone who has like tried to make as basically has made a living and getting to know how the whole board works in the same way that you now know how the
Hmm.
whole board works, like it would be great if there was a handbook. That'd be
Oh,
wonderful.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
but then I wouldn't be able to feed my family, so maybe not. Let's just
Yeah.
throw that out.
That's true.
Well, let's talk about. I would be remiss if I didn't address what I would say is, possibly the most common complaint about from retailers now about Lunar. And believe me, I'm going to come to the things you're getting right. So I want to talk, but I want to talk about the thing that you would hear the most from. And
Hmm.
I think it's ironic that this is the thing because you come from the discount comic book service, and you've always said that service is the key that has gotten you there. And there's always this joke about price, discount, and quality. You have to pick two, right? You can't pick all three. You
Right.
guys done your best to pick all three for
Hmm.
DCBS, but you know it, when people talk about Lunar in like retailer meetings and parties and such, they talk about a lot of really great things, and I'm not going to talk about them yet because I want to get into them a little more in detail. But one of the things that they criticize, one of the things they have a problem with, is service. They don't feel
Hmm.
like they're being heard. They don't feel like they have someone to talk to. They don't feel like they have an advocate or a representative. Like this is something I've heard enough times that it's become that I can feel confident in saying it to you in a public space, right? And without it, I don't want to. There's
Yeah. Yeah.
no slack. I mean, no shade given on this. How do you feel when you hear that? How do you address that as a company? Like, is this what is that? What does that come? How does that land with you?
I mean, people have their own perceptions, and they, I it's difficult. Okay. So when Comics Pro does their retailer distribution survey,
Yeah.
and we would see the results on it, right? Which we always score very highly, and the only time we don't is with service. And I have to tell you, like my customer service director, it like makes me want to cry because like Works
She's
so hard.
she's wonderful, by the way. I've met
Yeah, she
her.
is
She's
absolutely this. She is a
a
sweet angel
darling.
baby,
Yes,
but she deals with some of the meanest people, and I mean really, like people who are just and like on a one-on-one type of thing. She
truly.
has worked so hard to get people into like payment programs and working through getting like their orders fixed when they screw them up and just like all sorts of stuff. And that's, it's all of that hard work that she does that, like, she never gets credit for, and no one usually ever does, right? Because when everyone's really happy, they're not saying anything. The one thing we always get dinged on is that we don't have a phone. Okay. And so every time, and the thing is, we tried the phone. It didn't work. I would
Yep.
have to hire 50 people to run phones. Like, and another publisher told me once, they said, oh, we stopped doing that because it just ended up being like therapy for, like, my salespeople were just like therapists for, and and I get it. Like, everyone wants this interaction. So yes, I've told, and every once in a while I have to tell my CSR team, like, hey, we gotta fluff these emails up a little more. I know you're like answering the question, you're getting them what they need. Like, they do need to feel like you're being more personable. And by the way, they're very personable people. It's just that they have a job to do, and they're answering, and they're trying to make sure that everything's answered within the hour, or a solution is done within 24 hours, all this thing. Um, so I kind of push back on the bad customer service, because I have to tell you that, we've been doing these retailer events for, over a year now. And even at our last event at C2E2, we had many retailers that came up to us and said, yeah, I used to be that person that was real mad at you about the phone. But, I realized, I don't really need to talk to you. Like, you answer all my questions, you take care of everything, and I'm like, yeah, the other big thing is, like, we can go back, and anybody can go in if somebody's sick, one day and has to look at emails, they can go back and look through the thread, and they can, take care of somebody. And so I think that, you know, if you're not talking one on one with them, they feel like they're not getting as good service, even though, we are providing the best service we can. And I think it's the newest best service that we can. Um, the phone, it's not going to happen. Like, it's just, it does not make sense. And we have hundreds and hundreds of people who have told us they're incredibly happy with our service. Yes, there are certain things that I can't tell anybody, because we take the hit for it on our end for things that are not our fault. And we're always going to do that. We're never going to throw a publisher under the bus. We're not going to throw a printer under the bus. That's how it is. We're going to take the flack for it, and it's going to be fine. We are always in retailers' corners. In fact, if you talk to any publisher, we constantly go back to those publishers and we're like, don't do that. This is what the retailer is going to say. This is what the retailer doesn't want. And, but we don't have the final say in a lot of those things. But we are always advocating for the retailer, like, to a fault sometimes, where they get kind of upset with me because they're like, yeah, but we got to figure out a way to do it. Um, and so I just, that's not something that I'm going to advertise. I'm not going to, I'm going to do it in the background, and I'm going to do what I can in the best way possible for my retailers. And they don't need to know I'm doing it.
Listen, I don't disagree with anything you just said. As someone who has spent literally thousands of hours on the phone with retailers, I can tell you
Mhm.
that yes, oftentimes you are the therapist. They're the you are the person that they get to talk to on that day that isn't a customer
Mhm.
that they have to take care of, and so you get all of their anger and vitriol.
Mhm.
I can tell you that I have heard so many stories about CSRs from Diamond who have been, uh, quit just because they got yelled at and were crying at their desk. Reasonably so, right? I know
Mhm.
that, I know Chris Powell has taken quite a bit of flack, but I'm telling retailers, you're going to stop talking to my CSRs that way.
That's right.
You're
Yeah.
going to be a grown up and talk to
Mhm.
people with your grown up voice.
Mhm.
So, I totally get all of that. It's just part of my job. It's just to,
Yeah, of
like,
course. I don't
get you
care.
wound
Yeah.
up.
Yeah. No. I mean, that's as wound up as I'll get, but
I know it to be true, and I also know you to be an advocate. I do actually do believe that. But you did mention something inside of there, which is the payment plans, and I do want to scratch at that a little bit because one of the things that Diamond has been, one of the things that has been a uh, whether or not they should have, whether or not that is needed, or whether or not it was even been good for our industry is debatable. And we could have that. We could have a roundtable on this and really discuss that if you wanted to. But they have been the bank of comics, right?
Mhm.
They have loaned money to stores. Famously, I mean, you mentioned a store earlier there was a chain that got really deep into them. There have been
Mhm.
chains that have like tried to grow just on the terms that Diamond has built,
Mhm.
and then eventually gone bankrupt. That has happened and left them home in the bag. But they've also borrowed money from different people and then loaned money. They've essentially become the bank. Everything comes in and out of it. And you guys have not really taken that role, is my
No.
understanding. And I'm just going from outside perspective. It's been my understanding that you're a lot less, let's say, lenient with delinquent
Yeah.
accounts. And
Mhm.
I believe you should be. I believe that that's part of this is a business, and it's
It
not
is a
your job to
business.
keep
Yep.
businesses that are not working open.
And
Um,
we have become more lenient, like over the last year, because we got burned in the beginning.
right.
And
You become
it's
more lenient,
no less lenient.
less lenient.
Sorry.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Um, and yeah, I mean, to be fair, when we started, there were a lot of diamond accounts that had COD. Still, I
Yeah.
didn't even know that was still a thing,
I
right?
know.
And I mean, I'm talking several hundred accounts that
Yeah.
were still on COD. And, we set it up with FedEx, and FedEx is like, why are you doing, like, we don't even want to do this anymore, And
Yeah.
it was a disaster. It was a nightmare. It's like, I didn't understand why people were even doing it. And it was costing them money. It was costing a lot of money to the customer. And we switched everything to prepay, and then you can build your credit with, or like build your payment history with us. And it's like very simple. Like, you go 6 months paying on time, and then we can start building and give you on receipt terms, then net, and then we can build it up. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you, we're never going to do 60 days like PRH.
Sure.
It's just, that's kind of untenable. I mean, I shouldn't say never. It's going to be a very long time before we would consider
Before
doing
somebody
something like
starts
that.
building up enough, chips to go into 60. Yeah.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
Cameron looks at our liability all the time, and you'd still
Sure.
be surprised. I mean, now that all new accounts are prepay, so like as a new account, you're prepay, and then you can build to where you can actually earn terms. But I think retailers that get upset would be shocked by the amount of money that we're owed by people who had terms with Diamond that we, gave them as well. And they would say, "Oh yeah, I wouldn't want to lose that amount of money either,"
Yeah, no
because it's a
doubt.
lot. It's a lot, and
Would you say
we
it's
try
an
to mitigate
increasing
that.
problem or a decreasing problem?
It's very it fluctuates a lot, really. I'm
Okay.
going to be honest.
So it's not trending in one direction or another?
No, no. In fact, I haven't even noticed it lately. I think the prepay terms help that, because I think if you know you're prepaying, then you're maybe a little smarter with what you're ordering. Um, and I mean, there are still those one offs where you're just like, oh my gosh, they've been with us since the beginning. And now, they owe us $20,000 and we can't get a hold of them. And, the store is closed, and, things like
Yeah.
that, because they had terms. So, and that is cost of doing business. I get it, but I
Yeah.
don't think that stores realize the credit risk a distributor takes on. And I think it was very difficult for Diamond. I mean, I own mail order comics right now because of that very scenario. So, but not everyone can buy up other stores. Hopefully that is something that can happen. I know Steve Anderson's doing a great job of
I just
expanding his empire. Yeah.
the Steve was my last interview before this one. I don't think,
Oh, nice.
yeah,
I love
and
Steve.
we talked
Yeah,
quite a
Steve's
bit about him
fantastic.
growing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons that we began this podcast, to be honest, was we saw that happening. Like, I feel like there's just going to be a I think we're going to start seeing these small chains kind of grow to medium-sized chains, and I think we could be on the precipice of our first nationwide chain. And if there's a short list of people who could do it, Steve Anderson has to be in that list.
Absolutely.
There's no
Oh yeah,
question at all. You know.
absolutely.
So, well, excellent. So let's talk about the thing. Let's talk about your gold star, 100%, no question at all, and let's tell it as a story, right? So we go through COVID. Nobody's getting any product. Distribution ships. DC comes to you, says, "Hey, let's split." Then Marvel goes to PRH, and now PRH is
Hmm.
a player. And it was obvious to anybody who had dealt with PRH before they were a comics distributor that this was going to be a shipping nightmare, at least at first. But they seem to have figured it out. And I will say that uh, in many cases, you guys just came out of the box just best in class, right? I think in many
Hmm.
ways you taught Diamond a thing or two, right,
Yeah.
on shipping. There was no doubt in it. And anybody who was like, I can't believe that our competitor is now our distributor, even those guys were like, but man, they ship.
Yeah.
Jeez, please. And I
Hmm.
will tell you that as a retailer, as a publisher, I was with a particular project I was on. We came to you right before
Hmm.
COVID, legitimately the
Yeah.
week before the COVID shutdown,
Yes. Hmm.
came to you and said we were going to be entering. We need somebody to handle fulfillment, and we saw your facility and we're like, well, these guys know what they're doing, you know. So all of that said, now 4 years later, we still have three fairly solid distributors. Each of you
Yeah.
has carved out your place and don't seem to be
Hmm.
going anywhere, which is remarkable to me. I really thought it was going to be more chaotic than it has been.
Yeah.
Um, but you seem to have set a gold standard, right?
We'd like to
Not
think so. Yeah.
not just in the boxes themselves, which you had to teach Penguin Random House, a massive publishing company. You had to teach them how to ship, right?
Yeah.
Not just in that, but also in the shipping amounts, right? How to
Yep.
talk about the shipping costs, how
Hmm.
to deal with like what goes into a box. Um, how much of your standard? I mean, am I just putting that together, or do you really? I mean,
Oh
is it
yeah.
you feel pretty confident that you set the standard that everybody else is living up to?
I like to think so. Yeah. I mean, and to be fair, we started it with DCBS. We just modified it. And we've been getting diamond boxes for 25 years. So there were things we definitely were like, the thing is, Diamond still moves a ton of product, right?
Yes.
And they move a lot of weird shaped product.
They
So,
not only move a lot of weird shaped product, but they will take a single issue comic book that you order on a website and they will go to a place that looks like a warehouse out of the end of Indiana Jones and find the
yep.
one shelf where that box
Hmm.
lives, and they pull one copy out and they will put that into a box with you with a toy and a something and something and something, and most of the time it will get to you exactly the way you want it.
Yeah.
That's mind-boggling
Right.
accomplishment. So anyway, not
It
to talk great
is.
about your
No,
competitor,
no,
but
you're exactly right, though. You're exactly right. The thing is, like, I think we've been doing it for 25 years. So we just said, this is how you pack boxes, like, or books. And this is the way you make, I think this is the difference. I know Diamond for a very long time, and I haven't known for years since Lunar, but like, I know for a very long time, they were like, we bring people in to try to make it as accurate as possible, but we don't want them to really know the value of the product because, they might steal it. I don't know. Right. But they didn't really want people. And from the very get go, we were like, you have to know the value of this product and you have to know the value of our customers to us and to you as an employee. And that is something that if you were in it, like just today, I walked through the warehouse. I was checking some inventory locations on stuff because, my watch told me I needed to stand up because I'd been working spreadsheets too long. And, I went, I was walking through, there's music bumping because they always have music playing and everyone gets, their choice. I say buenos dias to my preppers because they speak very little English and they're like, in their like 60s and they're amazing and they stand all day long. I don't know how they do it. And they just prep boxes all day long. All day long. They prep boxes. They bag and board ratio variants on certain days, that, whatever. And I'm walking through and people are busy and they're happy and they're helping each other, and it's just like it is the biggest family that Taylor's created in that warehouse that I bring myself to tears multiple times at just walking through my own warehouse, because I had been in the diamond warehouses and it's very different. It's a very solitude, focus, do this. And I'm not saying it's bad. It's just different. It's just a
You've got
different
literally got
environment.
people standing in a weird, like a space in the middle
Yeah.
of the structure
With
with
something
headphones
telling
on.
them. Yep.
That's
Hmm.
just, and this robot saying,
Yeah.
"Go to this place, pick this piece,
Hmm.
scan, agreed. Go to this place." That's what they hear all day. That's a
Yeah.
different culture. Yeah,
It is, and I think I would want to blow my brains out if I had to have that job. I mean,
yeah,
I think a lot of people, just couldn't quite handle that. There are people who absolutely can, and that's why they
yeah.
work in that. But this is the thing that I'm going to tell you about Lunar. Lunar doesn't have to be the biggest. PRH can be the biggest. Diamond can be bigger. I don't care. We want to be the best. And that is more important to me than being the biggest. And I think that that's where PRH and Diamond may go wrong, is that, I don't think it makes sense to send somebody to the end of a 4 football field warehouse to pick one book. Like, that's not even efficient, by the way. Like it's, and it doesn't make sense to me. Like, I think there needs to be some sort of contraction in that type of thing, right? And in that our customers are getting the best product in the best shape we can send it to them and in the timeliest, least expensive way, so that they can really like make it what they need to make it and they have the best potential of profit.
Thanks for the excellent pull quote. Um, can I also say for a moment, something you said about your preppers? You talk about your preppers. I just imagine now I mean, this is not in my standard, but you have the best, I would say the best social media of any distributor
Oh,
going right now.
we do.
There's a by and large, like you may have the best social media of most comic book companies, period, for your
Yeah.
just comic book distribution company.
Yeah.
I can't remember that guy's name, but he's
Raul.
Raul.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Raul's
Fantastic, Raul. If
fantastic.
you're listening to this,
Yeah.
buddy. But I'm giving you right now, here's your reel, okay? I want video of those preppers just making like ASMR, just making boxes all
Oh,
day. I want
okay.
overhead shots of bags and
Yeah.
boards being made.
Okay.
That's what
Okay.
I want. That's the juice.
Well,
That's gonna
it's
that's
so
gonna get
funny when
views, baby.
Jeff Johns came into the warehouse to sign some Ghost Machine books, like
Yeah.
right before it came out, and he all he wanted to meet was Raul. He was like, "Well, I got to meet Raul," like he was like some celebrity, and I was like, "Well, hi, Jeff." I mean, Jeff was
Uh,
perfectly lovely, but yeah, no, he's like a
You have
celebrity. It's so
amazing
funny.
people on your staff. If I
Oh
had
yeah,
if I had a pool of who was going to get poached by someone else first, it's going to be Raul. I'm just saying this right now.
yeah,
You better watch out
I
for that comp
know.
package, baby. He's going
That
to
is
come
a
in and
worry.
renegotiate. All right. So I want to talk about it occurred to me recently that you and Cameron
Mhm.
have likely the most accurate view of the health of the comic book industry, and have at least since Lunar began. Maybe
Mhm.
before, but let's just say since Lunar began. You have, you're either the number one or number two. It's been back and forth between you guys in Midtown for as long as I can remember. Uh, Comics retailer. You have
Mhm.
relationships with every major publisher and every stakeholder in the industry, and you now are the exclusive distributor for the number two and number three publishers in comics, not to mention everybody else who has come on board as a split exclusive. Can you talk for a minute? And I would love to get into granular as you're willing to go. because believe me, this is we're an hour 40 in. I'd go another hour if you wanted to talk just about this. But the health of the comics industry, specifically, like we talk a lot, there's a lot of conversation, and it's all speculation because there are no solid numbers, right?
Right.
There are no reported sales numbers anymore, and even when we had them, they were not accurate. We can
No.
get into that, how silly that whole system was. But talk to me now over the last 4 years. Let's just start with retailers.
Okay.
Retailer count, like, let's say the count of brick and mortar stores, and the health of the stores overall, as you can see, like their sales and your accounts receivable, if you will,
Mhm.
right? So
Okay. So over the last 4 years, we have stayed almost dead steady. There are people that close, there are people that open. Um, there has not been any severe change. I think the only shift that we have is that there are some long-term brick and mortar stores that have actually just gone online only. I mean, Carr just announced that. Steve Olson did. There are a lot of people who realize that brick and mortar maybe wasn't for them anymore. For just, and it's not even the circumstances of the industry necessarily. Sometimes it's the circumstances of their location and not being able to find, an acceptable replacement for their current location. Um, there is not a huge fluctuation, though. In fact, Cameron did this analysis for DC recently because, Nancy's like, how, and we do not track, like, I'm going to be honest with you, most stores don't tell you when they're going to close. They just stop ordering, right? And then you realize, oh, they haven't ordered it. Like you run things and you realize, oh, they haven't ordered in 4 months. And so it's not like they just announced to the world they're closing. Some people do. There have been an inordinate number compared to the last 3 years of owner transitions. So they're transitioning, they're either selling to employees or they're selling to, somebody else who wants the business. And Emily told me, starting this year, it has been like considerable. Um, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I think getting new blood in may actually help some of the stores that have kind of been stagnant for some time, and or just not even stagnant, but just like need some fresh blood in it. Um, I don't. The overall health of the industry is just as good as it was in 2019, and people act as if it's not because we had the pandemic where it was awful, and then the numbers were terrible that whole year, and then 21 nobody could keep anything in stock because everyone was still home and people were buying. I mean, I could have sold people used cotton balls, I think, and it would have been fine, right? Like it was ridiculous. I could have literally, it wouldn't have mattered what you sold. um and then, so because you had such a stark difference in 20 and then 21, 22 felt like this utter failure, but it wasn't. It was just like a more leveling out. And 23 was still a further leveling out. But generally speaking, the numbers are still higher than they were in 2019. I mean, DCBS, absolutely. IST, absolutely. But I'm saying even from 2020, our stores are the same way. I mean, there are people still earning, max image discounts, higher DC discounts, those types of things. And that's the only way I can gauge it compared to, what it was with Diamond. Because, anyone who came over, we honored their Diamond discount. So if they're maintaining that discount or they're going higher, then that means that they're growing. And that is what we're seeing. So I do think that there's a general malaise with retailers in just not having something super exciting to sell right now. And I truly feel that they don't know how to navigate. They told publishers for years they didn't want events, right? We're tired of event fatigue, event fatigue. But consumers want events. And the big part of that is that they don't want an event that just shows up. Like there needs to be this build up to an event, and we're not really seeing that anymore. It's like, oh, here's an event, and there's no like real um like anticipation. I mean, I still remember Blackest Night. Like our employees went insane for Blackest Night
Yeah.
because of all of that buildup and the anticipation and just not knowing what was going to happen. And that's really the last time I remember just even my employees that weren't comic people before they started working for us. They were just going insane over this thing. And I think that's something that publishers need to start looking at is getting back to like just some, I mean, doing something really crazy. Do a DC Marvel crossover, do a DC Image crossover that just like gets everybody involved and just people are like, oh, well, I don't normally buy DC, but I'm going to for this because, and vice versa.
I'm sorry. Yeah, you're the exclusive distributor for DC and Image. Did you just give me a tiny little exclusive? Is that something
No,
coming that you
I
don't
did
know
not
about?
at all.
That's,
No, but don't think I'm not going to pitch it to them.
I got you. I got you. All right. That is excellent. That's exactly the answer I was hoping for.
Yeah,
Because we both work in comics. I want this industry to succeed. I built this company because I wanted a company that was going to be incentivized for the industry to succeed.
yeah,
Um, so all right. So where do you think? Let's talk a moment. Then that's retailer. It's kind of retailer. You kind of give me a behind the scenes of retailer and publisher health. I think circulation numbers. Where do you see? Are you seeing a trend one direction or another? Like for the bestsellers, let's not talk about the average. Although we can talk about the average if you want. But like,
right.
where's the top end look like?
I think the trend is definitely still towards nostalgia. Like, and I think that, I mean, you can see that like with Thundercats. I know I don't distribute it, but I sure sell it. I think that anything that's nostalgic based, people are really, because, I mean, an election's coming up. People are just in a real weird place right now this year. And I see that just like, just in interactions with people that aren't even in the industry, just like in general, people just are almost on edge. And I think that when you do that, I just talked to somebody today and they said someone just wants a warm blanket, right? They just want, and that's true, like they want comfort, and comfort is mashed potatoes, chicken and noodles, and your favorite Batman comic that you read when you were 13, right? And so it's that type of thing that I think works, but I also think that it's like people just get fatigued with like this is what I have found with publishers is once they find a certain type of genre works, they just like go all in. And I'm just like, like I just and forgive me, I'm not throwing shade at anyone, but if I have to read one more post apocalyptic story, I'm gonna die. I'm gonna hope for the apocalypse at this point. I want unique stories. I want genuine like things that make me feel and make me terrified and make me cry and make me laugh. And like we don't have enough funny stuff. They're freaking comics. And like it's that kind of thing that just drives me crazy because they just are doing what they see works, but they're not really kind of going outside the box sometimes. And I'm not saying that, I'm just saying like in general, like I was a reader that loved, I read Preacher, and Scalp is literally one of my favorite Vertigo titles of all time. I always go for the much, darker stuff anyway. But, I love a good funny one too. So yeah, I just, I don't know. But the thing is,
That's perfect.
I want
So
so bad for somebody to give me, another like saga. It doesn't have to be
I
saga, but just
know.
like another book that like every month I couldn't wait for it to come out. And I haven't really seen anything like that in a while.
And I did want to talk about this. You did an interview in 2020 where you talked about comics not really catching you, about nothing having really, and I suffer from this. I mean,
Yeah.
for me, it's about the fact that when I read comics now, my job is to find the things that are wrong.
Yes.
Right? It is my literally thing that people pay
Yeah.
me for, is to look at this page and say, what can we make better here?
Right.
So when I try and read comics for pleasure, it's challenging. It's difficult for
Mm-hmm.
me now to find that. So I when I heard you in this interview say that, I felt for you, because I know it's a very similar thing for you. However, that said, since 2020, has anything caught you? Has anything got you? Anybody? Is there anything that they're pulling? I assume one of each for Cameron, and they're putting
Yes.
him in some secret vault with Mylars. And there's just one guy whose job it is to curate the Cameron collection. That's what I'm assuming. But is there a Christina pull list these days?
Honestly, the only I have read very little in the 4 years that I've been doing this. I read a lot of PDFs. The one thing that I have read the entire series was Nice House on the Lake, and it was literally one of the best things I've read in probably 5 years. I absolutely loved it. It was everything that I thought a Vertigo title should be, and I told James that. It's absolutely amazing. I have started a lot, and I just am so darn busy. It's embarrassing to say. I try to read as many PDFs as I can. I really liked the first issue of Creature from the Black Lagoon. I loved it. Um, I thought it was fun, and it's like it wouldn't have been something that I would have normally read. But I thought, okay, I'll read the PDF, and it was a lot of fun, and I liked it. Um, but I haven't really been able to sit down. There are tons of things I want to read. I have it's an embarrassing pile
That's
of
a.
comics.
I think
Um,
that's a good testament. Then I mean, your
yeah,
standards are
no, because
high.
there are tons that I do want to read that have come
Yeah.
out in the last few years. It's just,
Well,
life.
but I do have a couple more things. One, before we leave the health of the industry, something I've been asking around. I personally, I talk to a lot of new publishers. It's been kind of
Mhm.
become a specialty of mine. I'm sure you do too.
Yeah.
And I think new publishers are really incredibly important to our industry, because they mean that someone new is investing money in our industry, and that investor money almost becomes part of the ecosystem that when it's missing, you can feel it. Are you seeing, would you say that we're seeing more or less people who are approaching you as new publishers looking to launch, and maybe maybe, I don't know about the quality, you can talk about that, but do you have some feeling for that?
I have, I think, 40 plus publishers on my wait list right now. Um, and at varying degrees of quality, right? Some that are like not quite there, and many that are, but I don't know that it's the right mix for my customer right now. But to be fair, they're all on a wait list because we only have so much room in our warehouse. And Images Transition was big, and they have a tremendous backlist. They sell a ridiculous amount of backlist, which is awesome, by the way. Love it. And so we have like put a hold for the last year and a half on taking anyone new that we hadn't already been in the works of getting. And we've reached a point where we're like, almost out of space already. And that's where I talk about, okay, we gotta be the best. We don't necessarily have to be the biggest. We have to make sure that the publishers we bring in they make the most sense to my retail
Yeah, that makes
accounts.
sense.
And I think that I do find, and I'm not, again, throwing shade at anyone, but I find that some of the publishing companies that just get like an incredible investment in them aren't necessarily putting those funds in probably the right places or making the right decisions.
Well, you have
Um,
to hire the right people to tell you where to spend that money, because
right. I
otherwise you will
think that's
feather
a
it
big
away.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think what I do like about is publishers are really starting to get a sense of, we got to try something really different here. And I like that. But what I find with publishers as a whole, and I'm saying this literally from the top, is I don't feel like anyone right now has like just this grand plan of, of this is what I see our brand as being. This is what needs to happen over the next 2 years. I always feel like publishers, distributors, retailers are always like, we're always flying by the seat of our pants. Like we're always 2 days behind trying to like catch up, right? We're never like ahead of the game. I've always felt like that since the very first, and I get it. It's a weekly, right? It's every week new products got to come out, and it's not. I'm not saying that like all publishers are like that. I'm saying like generally speaking, I think all publishers feel like that though. They feel like they're just constantly playing catch up, and they don't really have a chance to really make these grand plans. And I think it has a lot to do with just profit margin. It has a lot to do with staffing. I mean, the pandemic, if it didn't do one thing to us, it definitely, no one has the staff that they used to have.
Oh yeah, they're
Um,
just brutalized.
right.
I mean,
And so now you have everyone wearing 3 or 4 different hats that didn't used to do that. And it's tough on everybody.
this has been wonderful. You've given me so much. I have a couple more questions, and mostly because, as I mentioned earlier in the interview, I'm on a family trip, and
Yeah.
the house here has done a great job of being quiet. But even through my headphones, I can hear them, and I do not.
Well, I'm sure you heard my dog barking and howling at the neighbors earlier. Sorry about
I do
that.
not envy Steph, the producer's job at trying to like cut in and back and
Yeah.
forth between my audio. I'm just going to skip ahead to a couple more. I've been asking everybody, and I cannot wait to hear your answers for this.
Okay.
Uh, to you, what do you think right this second? And maybe, I mean, maybe it's always been there. Maybe it's been this sort of Damocles that has never left. But what do you think is the biggest threat to the direct market?
Hmm. The biggest threat to the direct market. Uh, Other entertainment. I think that's the biggest threat. And we have to provide the appropriate amount of entertainment at the right value to stay in the game. And I think sometimes we're good at it and sometimes we're not. But I think every other entertainment that we compete against is going to be the thing that is the biggest threat to us.
That's a fantastic answer. What gives you hope for the future of our industry?
The passion that everyone has for it. If the amount of passion that everyone had was like funneled into this positivity of growing the industry, we'd be like 10 times bigger than we are now. I think there's a lot of like angst and anger and rage about the things that have happened, and like everyone just seems to like just go, you know what, that's done. We're done
Yeah,
with that. Let's just all focus and like make this move and figure out how to get us further ahead. And I
it's
think there are
nothing
a
but
lot of
love.
people who, you know, are willing to do that.
I love that. And I love that you have been that passionate, optimistic person for as long as I've known you. I mean, and I've known you to be, and not only impressive, but occasionally I'll say it's scary.
Yeah,
Your power, the power you bring to a room, is palpable,
it
especially
is
when
not. I do
you
not
walk in
get
the
that.
room and you're like this aw shucks sort of like Midwest house mom, and then like after a while you're like, oh man, this woman's gonna slip my neck. I'm not gonna be real careful anyway. And so I look forward
I
to this.
don't get it. I don't get, but I know. I mean, there are certain employees that are terrified of me, and I don't get it. I don't like. I'm a very personable
I
person,
have
but
zero problem believing that. Well, this has been wonderful. Can you just take a minute, like, just tell us if there's anybody watching this who has no idea who you are or what it is you guys do? How do they find you? How do they hear from you? And if they want to see your kids' pictures on the
oh,
internet, where do they look?
oh my gosh. Well, I mean, I am on Twitter and have not tweeted anything in probably 10 years.
Wow. It's actually
Uh,
been I did look this up. I think it has been, yeah, 10
yeah,
10.
it's
Yeah.
probably been 10 years. And then Really, the only thing I'm on is Instagram, because I find that is the most like positive social media platform. I don't even know. I think I'm just Christina Merkler on there. I don't even know what I have all of 200 followers, and it's, most of my family. And
I'm
you will
on there.
see lots of like family trip photos, my dog, the kids when they have birthdays. But I'm just terrible at social media. I really am not good at it. Like, I'm only on Facebook to, answer questions or look to see if there are issues in the FOC group. That's it. And I only ever got a Facebook because DCBS had a Facebook page and I had to be a moderator. So the only way you
Oh
can be
yeah.
is if you have a Facebook. You can just get me through service at Lunar Distribution, because the team will forward anything on to me that they feel that I need to take care of. So
If you're a customer looking to buy from DCBS or looking to buy from In Stock Trades, or you're a retailer who wants to open a Lunar account, what should you do?
yeah, so lunardistribution.com is where any retailer is going to go to register for an account. And the wonderful team will help you go through that. And then we also have a customer facing site on that. And then dcbservice.com is for DCBS, and instocktrades.com is for InStock Trades.
Wonderful. Thank you,
Yeah.
Christina. This has been
Yeah.
fantastic. Hi again. Thanks so much for watching Comic Industry Insiders. It, as always, is our pleasure to talk to the movers and shakers of comics and to bring you those conversations. We'd love it if you'd support us with a like and subscribe, and telling your friends is always good, but really what we'd want to do is hear from you. Any questions, any suggestions you have about our show, any suggested guests, frankly, anything at all, we'd love to hear from you. Our producer is nearly always Stephanie Gerk, and our researcher is Anthony Militano, who makes me look much smarter than I am. All right, guys. Thanks so much. Namaste, y'all.